everybody. Welcome to the media show on the Pod TV network. My name's Nick Pallavita. I will be the moderator for today's show, which is Hot Topics. We're going to look at the hot topics of 2023 and what are the hot topics going to be in 2024. So it's not only looking at the past, but we're going to be futuristically looking at the future. With that, we're going to bring a person from the past who also lives in the future. I'm not sure if he's present, but he's also the writer of Chess for Dummies, FIDE Master from San Francisco, Jim Eade. Jim, welcome to the media show, and hopefully you'll be able to put on your hat and tell us what happened, the top stories in the past and what the stories will be in the future. Now, with that also, we have a person from Southern California, a member of the Mega Society, who doesn't dwell in the past but looks forward to the future, none other than Rick Rosner. So maybe, Rick, you can tell us what the future
because my past is full of failure, but the future is full of promise.
Oh, really? What a positive attitude. Okay.
Yeah, I can tell you that Taylor Swift advanced in the playoffs with Kansas City beating Miami.
Yeah.
And that is not only like good gossip and sports, but also Taylor Swift got 1 million young people to register to vote, which is a big deal. And the MAGAs kind of hate her, and now they hate Kansas City.
Kansas City's up to date.
And we're going to bring another person from the past who may have a future, a former billion-dollar hedge fund manager out of Australia, the mate himself, Shaquille Latmer. Shaquille could tell us what the hot stories are going to be in 2024, and what the hot stories were in 2023. And then, of course, our person that has over 100 years of broadcasting experience is broadcasting since he was 3 years old, and that's none other than Mark Lee, because his parents owned a radio station here in Durham. So that's the reason he was a little toddler on the radio. So
just over there crawling around on the station. It was actually in my teenage years and everything. But definitely, you mentioned, Rick, about sports, and definitely a lot of folks were glad to see Kansas City advance, because, like you said, that means that Taylor Swift will be another attraction at the next Kansas City game and everything. There is a team that a lot of people love. I don't like them because they actually root and play against my team, which was a horrible team this year, the Minnesota Vikings. But a lot of people like the Green Bay Packers, and they moved on as well because they are actually a team that is owned by the city of Green Bay. So the people that are in Green Bay actually help own the team and everything. So I actually have some friends from Green Bay, and they have a small interest in that team and get some revenue because it is a stock that is traded by the fans. So the fans actually own part of the team and everything. I think there might be some similar teams in Australia and other parts of the world as well, but Shaquille can tell me if there are some teams that are owned by folks like that and everything. And then there was a team that actually took 30 years to actually win a championship, because the last time they won was 1991, and a lot of people are jumping up and down in Detroit because Detroit's had all kinds of issues around water, revolving around a number of other issues and all kinds of things, including the car industry. But now they are celebrating in Detroit because they got their first win since 1991. So they are very ecstatic, and it was actually the only game that was somewhat competitive because they only won by literally a point. They won by 1 point.
They won.
Everything
That's all that matters. So, Rick, I got a question for you. What was Taylor Swift wearing? Because the Kansas City game was in sub-zero weather.
Well, she was in a box. She was insulated, but she was wearing Travis Kelce's number. And she had a jacket on
jersey. Red Kansas City jersey. Everybody knows.
So it was a heated box she was in. Okay.
It was probably 40 degrees in the box compared to like 4 degrees below zero outside the box.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of which, and I know this is the media show, but I did have one other sports thing I was going to mention, because I literally watched, don't ask me why, probably because it was the only thing that was on TV on Ion at that time, but I watched part of the soccer draft. Yes, there is a soccer draft as well, and the first 2 picks were literally from UNC, because UNC has a strong soccer program, and there were a number of other ACC players that did well and everything, but they were dressed to the nines as well. So they were definitely dressed as they're trying to go get their career started. I don't think that their career will be anywhere near the kind of money that the WNBA makes, and definitely nowhere near the money that the NBA makes. But hey, it is a professional soccer league, and I could be wrong about those salaries. Shaquille is in the sports lane, so he might know whether those people in the soccer lanes of women's soccer make any kind of money or not. But I did see that their draft was held literally on, I believe it was either Sunday or Saturday. But yeah,
there were pictures of Taylor Swift bussing in the box, picking up like the trash and the cups, which everybody rightfully found charming that she's a billionaire, but she still picks up trash.
Well, yeah, but there's cameras everywhere, so it's not like she's going to do something, that's not going to be popular with her fans.
Then she's smart enough to get caught on camera picking up. That's why I want her to be.
Or she knew the cameras were there. I think it's great that that she's out there encouraging people to register to vote. Whether they will actually go out and vote, though, is another question. It's something that's a little bit different about your system than ours. I've managed to get 4 fines in the last 18 months for not voting in various elections. I've been overseas. I have to speak to the Electoral Commission about that and get those fines removed. But
how much are the fines?
Not much. I think the last one was $40 or something. Which, to be perfectly honest with you, I know quite a few Australians that just say, you know what, it's not worth my time to go down and vote. I'd rather just pay the fine. That's not my case. I think it'd be disrespectful to my mother, who worked very hard to become a citizen of this country, for me to then take advantage of my citizenship and go, to hell with it, I'm not going to do that. But yeah, I've been overseas a few times and have missed a couple of elections that I actually didn't know I had to vote in, such as my local council elections. I didn't realise.
Well, you know what's going on tonight in Iowa? They have bad weather. Oh my goodness! Being in Iowa right now, going out at night.
Well, they said that
that was what I was about to bring up, actually, which is I'll be interested to see how what these results are. The presumption is that Trump's going to absolutely win this by a massive amount, maybe even get over that 50% mark. Now, he's actually gone out and said to people, like, please come out and vote. Don't just take it for granted I'm going to win. We need you to come out and vote. But you're right, it's cold. Now, look, I guess people in the Midwest are used to the kind of weather that I don't know why you guys live there. But you do. So whether they will come out, I don't know. The question as well is going to be what happens with those other candidates, the top 3, obviously. I tend to get the feeling that amongst the Republican base, they've turned a bit on Nikki Haley. She seems to be polling quite well. I think there'll be a question of whether or not Ron DeSantis finishes up in 3rd, in which case I think he realistically has to drop out of the race.
I hope so.
And with Vivek Ramaswamy, I certainly don't think that he'll come in 2nd.
No.
But will he take enough votes away from somebody like Nikki Haley? Donald Trump has slightly started to attack him a little bit, but I think his attacks on Vivek are much more tepid and restrained than what he said about Nikki Haley, which I think he needs to, if he has any chance of trying to recover some faith amongst the American people that maybe aren't going to vote for him anyway, he needs to stop with things like calling Nikki Haley a bird brain. If you don't agree with someone's politics, that's okay. But I think that just calling people's names, it's a bit juvenile. You've already had your run of doing that. You had 4 years of that. If you're now coming out saying, I'm the best man for the job, I'm better than Biden, I can do all these great things, and I've learned already how to be a president because the first time round I was new to it, well, I think you need to act a little bit more with the kind of behavior that people would expect from a president.
He's not going to change. He's going to be the same person.
Maybe he will. Maybe he will. But if he does do that, that could also mean that in some of those tight swing seats and swing states, it might hurt him. It might not too. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball.
Who knows? But yeah, there's no question that he's going to continue to be the clumsy oaf that he's always been. And
they used to say that George Bush.
I was just going to finish that thought. With DeSantis was getting attacked by Trump when he thought DeSantis was a threat. Now he doesn't think he is. He thinks Haley's a threat, so he's turned his attacks towards her. So, this is just the typical type of thing. If you're not with me, you're against me, you're the enemy. And right now, Haley's the enemy. And she might actually do pretty well in New Hampshire, but Iowa, that's pretty much of an evangelical state. I think Trump is going to have the victory lap that he's looking for. But New Hampshire might be a different story. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball.
That sort of MAGA group that people describe within the Republicans, they seem not to really like Nikki Haley. And I personally, I sort of somewhat see what they're saying, but I don't really agree. I think she's actually had a reasonably good career. I think that she's a great female candidate for the Republicans, and I'm not sure why there's that sort of
She's a normal Republican candidate from my day. You know,
but people are showing her as sort of being the Republican Hillary Clinton and things like that. Well, you know, and also just as a quick side note, if I can just have a moment of indulgence, I actually don't think that although she wasn't particularly popular, I don't think that Hillary Clinton was a bad politician. I think that she represented a lot of views pretty well. She dedicated her life to public service. Absolutely. I think that she would have been a good president.
She wasn't a good campaigner, but she was a
but for whatever reason, she just.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons why she didn't get there, I think, is because Democrats were quite negative towards her in those primaries. And this is what's going to be very interesting in this election because, you know, obviously Biden's the presumptive nominee for the Democrats. There's going to be a lot of media attention on the Republicans, and that could help or it could hurt. It's not like last time round, because last time round you had primaries for the RNC and the DNC. Here it's different. Here it's only on one side. And so if Republicans sit there and start attacking their own candidates too viciously, that could make a lot of people say, you know what, you're not the party for me.
Well, Christie's out. So.
Yeah, Christie's totally out, and Sununu actually
Haley
was back in Haley.
Haley's the least obnoxious Republican candidate. And that, I don't know, that might be worth a lot with independents.
It's worth a lot to me.
So the more progressive wing of the Democrats, though, are not very happy with Biden supporting Israel and the conflict over there. And very interestingly, the hard right seem to have a very similar viewpoint. So Nikki Haley has copped a bit of criticism from the hard right about her support for Israel. The question, I think, would be, for those people that are a little bit more moderate, but perhaps identify more on the progressive side on this argument, are they going to be so persuaded to vote for Nikki Haley if she was up in the presidential race against Biden? I'm not sure that would really be the case. I think it's going to be, unfortunately, for the United States, a Trump-Biden showdown. But anything could happen this year. Absolutely anything could happen this year. I think it's going to be a very interesting election that the whole world is going to watch more than most of your elections are watched.
Speaking of people watching stuff, and this we talked about it yesterday or a couple of days ago on the news, but this is actually throwing it to you, Shaquille, because there was a story that got into the whole notion of social media and even how politicians can influence social media, because apparently this whole spat around the Maldives had to do with Narendra Modi's taking an opportunity to praise the people of Lakshadweep and everything, and it was talking about the awe of the stunning beauty of the islands and the incredible warmth of its people, and then apparently some people took offense at that and actually pushed back about it. So apparently some Indians are boycotting because of what Narendra Modi said, and now it's turned into a social media spat, and I don't quite get it, but you are visited that area because you mentioned that to us on last week's show and everything. But what is this notion of using the social media to then create a spat that apparently could influence even tourism and everything?
Well, I mean, I don't like that idea. I mean, people say to me, "Oh, don't go to Florida because it's racist." Like, I've been to Florida heaps of times. It's fine. Don't go to San Francisco because there's homeless people and junkies everywhere. It's like, yeah, I go to San Francisco all the time. It's fine. That's all right. I'll be okay. Take obviously some care of yourself and be alert. But you're generally gonna be fine. I think one of the issues with Prime Minister Modi is that there is a lot of division that I think a lot of people don't see in India. Now, for someone like myself, who's Indian by blood, but we're 150 years away from India, what we're beginning to see in countries that have gotten along really well, that got rid of the caste system, that that started to share in each other's religious festivals and things like that. So Fiji, Indians that live in South Africa, Indians that live in Malaysia, etc. They got rid of all that stuff. But you're beginning to see a bit more divisiveness come, and part of that is actually because of something that a lot of people on the centre-right support normally, which is a sense of nationalism. But there's a sense of nationalism within India in a way that you've got to remember they got the caste system. You've got to remember that there's been a lot of disruption over the history. You've got to remember that people were, marched up to what is now Pakistan and other parts of that region. And so there is still some conflict and some long feelings and long memories. And so for someone like myself, I don't know whether my family would have ended up in what's now Pakistan or whether they would have stayed where they were. We don't know these things. And so I think when he weighs in on things that affect, what's the word, diaspora, Indian diaspora around the world, there's always going to be some backlash, and you can't get it right. You're always going to get people that are going to feel strongly one way or another.
No, but along the same lines.
My opinion of it, though, is sort of what I say with Israel-Palestine. Most people have never been there, don't really know the history that well. We're judging it based on what we read, what we see in the media. I think it's dangerous to take a strong position. We should always support peace and respect for human life and dignity. But I don't think we should take real strong positions in areas that we don't know. And I'd say the same thing. If you want to go for a holiday to the Maldives and you decide not to because some dickhead on social media said something bad about what some politician in another country that you've never been to, like, what's wrong with you? Go for a holiday to the Maldives.
Along those same lines, because we were earlier talking about Taylor Swift, and apparently there are, and I know that there is a big Indian like equivalent of Hollywood, Bollywood, and everything. And there's definitely some very popular Indian athletes, particularly in the sport of cricket. And apparently they've jumped into the conversation just like our American entertainers jump into the conversation as well. So how much should we be listening to celebrities, be they Bollywood celebrities, be they cricket stars, or be they folks like the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers that might come out with
I don't think we should listen to them at all. Let's take Taylor Swift, right? She's obviously a very talented singer. I mean, she doesn't really do it for me, but okay, I'm not some teenage girl. So she's obviously a very talented singer. Some of her songs I think are kind of cool. But I don't know what else she's got going on in her life. Is she like secretly a neuroscientist? Has she got a degree in political science? Like, why am I listening to her political opinion? She's a singer, right? I mean, I'm a little bit closer to politics because of my economics background, but I don't expect you to listen to me and go, oh, well, I'm going to change my opinion based on what Shaquille says. Consider what I've got to say. But, we had like LeBron James, there's a video of him just recently showing what I consider to be a really great amount of disrespect to the American flag, the American national anthem, where he was just walked through and just basically ignored it. We see celebrities turn their backs on American flags. So are the rest of us supposed to do that as well? It doesn't make any sense because especially a country full of immigrants. If you've immigrated to the United States, you probably think the United States is going to provide you with a better life. You're not going to immigrate to the country and then turn your back on the flag and show disrespect to the national anthem. It just makes no sense. And this is the thing. If to listen to celebrities and all, actors, singers, athletes, and all that. And I know because I come to the United States and they say it to me. I go, oh, this is a cool country. No, it's not. And they tell me all these things that are horrible. But if I shared that view, that the United States is this horrible, irredeemable country, why would I come to the United States? I would go somewhere else and have more respect.
This is a very funny phenomena when, you talk about, just to make an analogy to sports, every time I follow a team and they're the fans that are online talking about their team, they're spewing hatred. Well, so-and-so sucks. When I was growing up, you're a fan of your team, you rooted for your team, you rooted for whoever was playing on your team. But nowadays, people are just hating because they're not Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Will Chamberlain or somebody. They aren't great, and they can't do everything. And that's the way a lot of people think about their country. We look at what's wrong rather than what's right about the United States. And I'm of the belief, and I know I'm an optimist in this, but what's right about the country is going to fix what's wrong about the country. Now my faith has been challenged many times, including with facing Republicans nominating Donald Trump again, because obviously this is not in our country's best interest. And I can't believe that a majority of Americans will vote for someone like him. But, I have faith that even if, and he did get elected once, even if we can still survive. Now, our Supreme Court has been politicized, because Trump got 3 appointments in a 4-year span. And because the Senate minority leader said, Obama, you can't have one, and Biden, you can't have one. Either argument, which one was valid, that meant one of them had to have an appointment, and they didn't get it. So the Supreme Court has been politicized. We've been broken down our trust even in the Supreme Court. And when I was growing up, that was the last bastion. and we don't believe that anymore. So we have a lot of lack of trust in the United States, in our institutions. And that's reflected in people's attitudes about the United States in general. But I think we have to remember all of the great accomplishments of the country, all the great opportunities that it's given its citizens to rise above, to lead lives of dignity. And this is what America is all about, the United States, is to give people opportunities. And it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And as long as we focus on that, we have more in common than we have what distinguishes us.
Can I say, Jim, at the risk of being the delusional optimist for the United States, I don't think it matters who ends up in the presidency. I think the country's stronger. I don't mean it doesn't matter at all, but I think the country is stronger than the damage that one person can do. And actually, I think that there could be some positive. I know it doesn't seem like it, but there could be some positive in the breakdown of trust that you're seeing in some US institutions, such as Supreme Court, Congress in general, those sorts of things. And that is that your country's really founded on the idea that you don't trust government and power should rest with the people. And I think that when there is this level of dissatisfaction, and what's very interesting is if there's anything that people can agree on both sides of the political aisle in the United States, is that they're not happy. And they're not happy with the same group, government. So I think that is the impetus for change. You're about to see a new generation of people. It's not going to happen in this election cycle, but the next election cycle, you're going to see a new change. You're going to see perhaps a few younger people and younger ideas. Very young people, teenagers and early 20s, are becoming a lot more vocal. Their ability to express their opinions and views is much greater than it ever has been before. So the fact that this is a difficult time, it's not as difficult as other bad times. It's not a civil war. It's not that sort of thing. There's just a lot of dissatisfaction. And I think that could be positive. Just one final note, going back to the sports thing. You may not have noticed it last time I was on here, but I was wearing this shirt. And it's actually got my football team in Australia on it. Now, Travis, who was on, supports the other team, my rival team. And I have to say, I went to an event where there was 3 football players actually from both teams at this event in Western Australia. And a few people were lucky enough to be asked to come on stage and, meet the players. And one of the people that got, or a couple of people that got up, went up and shook the hands of the players that were on their team and just blanked and completely ignored the other 3 players. And I just thought, that is just like ludicrous. To me, that's just absolutely ludicrous. And, I've met people that are players for other teams. I've met politicians that are on the other, that, are in the other political party to the
Jack, I wore my Yankees gear in Fenway Park in the bleachers, so I can survive anywhere. And I like baseball, and I turn them around.
I don't understand why people have that kind of mentality in the first place. Because
I did get one beer thrown on me.
Yeah, well, maybe try wearing a Vegas shirt around San Francisco, or wearing either with her shirt in rural Mississippi or something. I don't know.
Rick, you got your hand up.
Yeah, this is our 3rd consecutive presidential election where the main 2 candidates are probably going to be old people with huge disapproval ratings, and it's bad for the country. It demoralizes people.
It does.
Like, if people could kind of pull together, or at least not be too disgruntled. I mean, there were people disgruntled with Obama, but most people weren't. And people liked him in office. They liked George W. Bush in office. They liked Clinton in office. They liked Reagan in office. It helps to have somebody charismatic in that role, as superficial as it is.
So this is where Donald Trump's done so much damage, I think, to himself. And he should know better, because he's been in media his whole life. A lot of his life he's been in media. Forget about his policies and whatever you think of him as a person. If he had a bit more of a sense of humor and a bit more, if he was a bit more sort of Ronald Reagan-like in his friendliness, I think that people would overlook some of the other things that he's said and done. But he doesn't have that endearing personality. And unfortunately, Biden just doesn't really, he's not very, very well able to express himself. He stumbles over his words. Kamala Harris, who I think seems like a really friendly, awesome person, I think she'd be a hoot to hang out with, but it's just not coming across very well. But what I will say is very interesting. There was a very young person under 10 years of age who said to me the other day, hey, is the popular vote in the United States linked to the president's age? It's like, what are you talking about? And if you have a look at the popular vote, it's about 1 million. It's about 1 million voters for every year that the president's on both sides. So maybe you'll get a repeat of that. I don't know.
Hey, by
Maybe
the
there's
way,
a correlation.
Trump ran for president because he doesn't have a sense of humor. He's threatened to run before several times over the past 20 years. What sent him over the edge this time was Obama making fun of him at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, telling jokes about him. And apparently that enraged him sufficiently that he ran for president.
Well, I think he does. I think he does have a sense of humor. It's just not one that's very relatable to a lot of people.
Republicans always at your expense. He made fun of a journalist that was disabled by doing this kind of stuff.
I know what you're talking about. I was talking to somebody else the other day. I'm not sure that wasn't quite how I interpreted what he did, but
that's what way most people interpreted it.
It's hard to tell if
hang on. I don't quite interpret it that way, but even if it was true, I think that he would have gotten away with that a lot more had he have had what we were talking about, that sort of more sense of humor and that friendly kind of thing, because people would just go, oh, maybe that's not what he meant. He wasn't really given the benefit of the doubt because he is a very caustic person. And one of the things that I brought up on one of the more recent shows was you just have to look at how he treats somebody who's actually always been on his side, Kayleigh McEnany. She was reading out poll results on a Fox News report, and she read out the wrong poll or something, and he immediately attacked her on Truth Social for being a nobody and this and that. I was like, dude, she's on your side.
Yeah,
she's taken it in a stride, but it shows you that he doesn't. He wants people to be loyal to him, but he's not really showing loyalty to other people. And I think that's a big part of why so many people are against him who know him or who have previously worked with him. And the Lincoln Project, for example, people that know Donald Trump, they're just like, look, this is not where we want to go. But unfortunately, your country's in this position where at the moment the polls are showing that he's more likely to win than not. I think that some of that, though, is because the Democrats are running Biden. And I think they should probably consider.
There's no question he's not the choice. I mean, I didn't vote for him in the primaries. He was like my fourth choice because of the reasons you said. But, the idea here is that people are, they may be faced with a Hobson's choice, but we know how bad one side is. And we can put up, I think, as you're saying, with a guy who's like he always stumbled over his words. That's not a sign of age. He always was famous for that, and this is the kind of thing is he's a decent person and represents American values. Donald Trump doesn't represent anything but his own self-interest. And he's turned on people that were loyal to him. As you said, I don't want to be interrupted when I'm saying this. And I do think that he engaged in 4,000 lawsuits. If he hired you to build his casino, he wouldn't pay you. And then when you sued him, he would sue you back. And so the poor laborers who did the work would, say all of a sudden, I didn't get paid and I had this big legal bill. And so he just squashed people like that left and right. And people in New York hated his guts. He's in Florida for a reason. Nobody would do business with him. Banks wouldn't do business with him. His only bank that he could get credit from was Deutsche Bank. And that was being funneled. Russian money was being funneled through them, they've been fined an outrageous sum for doing that. And, the people that are funneling money to Trump during his presidency, he was rerouting military so that they had to stay at one of Trump's hotels in England, or Scotland. I'm sorry, I think it was Scotland. And, staying at his hotels and jacking up the rates so that the government would pay for it. These are not the kinds of things that a president can do or not only should not do, but it's illegal for him to do that. And we haven't seen him pay the consequences for what he has done. And he's involved in 90 lawsuits now. So one of these lawsuits is going to be finished, but probably not by the time voters vote. So it's a travesty of justice. This guy is a criminal. He is a fraud. And it's not like I don't like him personally, which I don't like him personally. His track record is crystal clear. Rick?
It's hard to tell whether he's kidding or not, because when he says something horrible, his base eats it up, and then the liberals take what he said and report it as if yesterday. Trump said, it's going to be cold tomorrow. Show up at the caucuses anyway. And if you die, it's okay as long as you get your vote in. And it's like, liberal Twitter's like we're all running around on fire, but like, is that a joke or what the heck is that?
So can I say, I think the media plays a big part in that. So Jim, I think you perhaps get a little exacerbated because it seems really obvious that Donald Trump's, all the things that you've described, I won't repeat it all. And it should be really obvious to everybody else. I find that really fascinating from over here, from the other side of the world, and in a whole different hemisphere of the world to you, below the equator here. Because when we get news from the US, the mainstream news channels obviously have their affiliates or the groups.
Like Murdoch.
Yeah, so Murdoch, for example, Sky News is generally going to pull stuff from Fox. Whereas Channel 9 might pull stuff from NBC, Channel 7 will pull stuff from CNN. So you get this kind of interesting situation. And then if you happen to have cable and you can watch CNN and Fox here, which I try really hard not to do because both of them, in my eyes, paint such a bleak picture. And so when I come to the US, I look at the news and I think, if you were actually sitting there watching the news all the time, I think on either of these left-wing or right-wing networks, I think your view of the United States would just be such a depressing view. Because if you watch Fox, you've got these liberal mad people, especially you lot from California, and you're trying to trans all the kids, and, gender's not going to exist, and you're going to do all these horrible things, and you're just this socialist thing, and you want everyone to use drugs and have a huge homeless population. And you go to California, and like 40% of the people that live there are Republicans. That's not how they view things at all.
Drive an hour into the valley, and it's a different state. Yeah.
Right, exactly. You go to New York. You go to New York, and it's the same sort of thing. But to watch Fox, it's this bleak future of the government just wants to control everything. They want to, the Biden's going to check your bank account if you've got more than $600. Like, it's just this huge big thing of these elites that are using the government to crush you. Then you think, take a breath of fresh air. Let me turn on CNN and NBC or ABC or something like that. And all you hear is, these Republicans, they're out there. They want trans people to die. They don't care about you. They just want to blow the planet up with their oil and this and that. And I just think, because it's not my country, so although I'm very affectionate about the US, I think when you sit there and watch the coverage, it paints such a bleak picture of the United States. And I feel like a lot of people they don't have the time to really get their source of information from multiple sources. I think, Jim, that's probably part of the reason why there's a big group of people that are just going to vote for Donald Trump. They don't see what you see because they're watching how Fox spins it. Yeah. And then it's
confirmation bias. You can always get your news.
But hold on a second.
The Democrats isn't being acknowledged by the left.
Hold on a second. Shaquille and Jim and Rick, this is a question I have for both of you and everything, because Nick put it in the introduction. I've been in media since I was a teenager when my parents had that radio station, all along those lines. And when I look at the local coverage, and I'm curious to see if it's the same way in California and even where you are, Shaquille, in Australia, the majority of the coverage is around the crime of the day, whatever the criminal aspect of what's going on, and the weather. There's not a lot of, even what we do here on Pod TV, a lot of issue discussion and all along those lines. So I was wondering, is that what y'all also get in California and also in Australia? Because if I was to turn on literally in about right now, because it's a little bit after 12 o'clock, our local news and everything, it's going to be, what murder happened here, what murder happened there, and there might be a little bit of conversation around the weather. There'll be a lot, because we are in ACC country, of sports coverage and all along those lines. But a lot of the pertinent issues, even pertinent issues that we talk about Pod TV, they are covered like literally
mostly that
2% of the stuff, if that, and everything. But is it that way in Australia
also,
and California?
Mostly that, but also boobies. Our weather girls and our traffic ladies are spectacular. In fact, LA's hottest weather woman is now engaged to Bezos and is about to become the world's richest woman. And she used to go on, do the weather and sports. And her cleavage would always be forcing her shirt buttons open. And
and they get great.
You're just unhappy, Rick, because of your Naked at Night that you haven't had her on that. Is it still going, that Naked News?
No, they still have Naked at Night. It's a great
I haven't
show.
seen Naked News in like 10 years, but yeah, you used to be able to get not very good news delivered by news anchors who disrobe that was like an early.
The Fox News anchors, the women looked a lot alike.
No, but along the same lines, after they leave the news jobs and everything,
At
because
least
Kim
Bill Riley
Diener was a weather lady here, and I actually saw her about a month and a half ago, because she's now working for the Department of Transportation. So they actually came to one of my jobs to dedicate a road to the Pacific families, or Pacific Highway. They were dedicating them because of their role in education and everything. So they literally came to the HOPT Center, but Kim Diener was a weather lady, very typical attractive blonde, and all in that space. So a lot of times they do that, or they even sometimes do social media, because I know that there was a very popular family here. The guy's name was the Holderness family, and you can literally look them up, because they would do like these kind of corny Christmas songs and Halloween songs and all as a family. So they will sometimes do the social media type deals.
What about that Ruby Frank or whatever, and abusing her kids and having this really weird kind of way of raising her kids, and she's recently been arrested. I do want to come back to if it bleeds, it leads.
Right.
This is, I think, a very poor reflection of really, I've got to say, government responding to concerns. So let's take the Black Lives Matter situation after George Floyd was killed.
It's an immediate.
That should never have actually needed to happen in the first place. It should not just in the United States. I'll leave the United States aside for a minute. Let's talk about other countries around the world who also started to have similar themed protests about minority communities and their interactions with police. Did it really require somebody to be killed under the circumstances George Floyd was killed for government to finally pay attention? This is not a new topic. This is something that people have been complaining to government about for decades, and nothing's been done.
Longer.
Right? The COVID lockdowns, for example, there was a lot of people that were concerned that didn't feel comfortable with the vaccines, that were worried about what government was doing. And you could leave that issue aside, but on so many issues that people have real concerns. Healthcare, Jim. You and I have talked about that. People are concerned in the United States that people are not being able to access healthcare, or in the third position that they're going to go bankrupt, or they're stuck in a job because they can't afford healthcare if they leave that job and have to pay for it themselves. But this is madness. But yet government's not reacting to it.
The only reason the government got involved, or police got involved, is because of this. People filmed what was going on, because it's been reported, and we turned a blind eye and a deaf ear.
That's right.
It's been going on for a long, long time. Mark knows this better than I do, and the people just didn't want to hear it. Now, when they can't deny it, all of a sudden they take action.
That was one example. So George Floyd, yes, it was caught on camera, but that was one example. Let's take another example, right? I'm not trying to pick on California because my family lives there. That's why I know a bit more about California. Netflix did a 6-part documentary it was called The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez, which was a young boy who was abused by his parents and died as a result. And there was a lot of criticism of the LA County Board, or whatever they are, that run this thing. Now, this criticism, again, it wasn't new. It was old criticism, but it was only after that got some media coverage that people started to pay a little bit of attention. Now, I've spoken to a couple of people that work in the DA's office over there fairly recently and said, what changes have you really seen being made? You're like, yeah, there was a few changes for a little bit, and that was kind of it, and the situation just gets pushed under the rug. So the point that I'm trying to make is, unfortunately, I think you see more extreme types of protests because people on both sides, left, right, whatever, feel as though the issues that matter to them aren't being heard, aren't being responded to, and that there isn't any conversation about how to fix these things and move forward.
The government
Hold on a second, and I did see your hands, Rick and Jim. But ironically, there's a number of things that are, when they're reflected, then people are wondering about the sentencing. I was literally watching yesterday an episode of 48 Hours, and there was a famous case of a couple that literally murdered their father. The mother actually lived, but they were trying to kill their parents, and all along those lines and everything. And the son is actually serving like 35 years along with the people that actually committed it, because he hired some hitmen to kill the family and everything. But the girlfriend, who was actually the wife at the time, she got like some ridiculous sentence, like 120 days, and is actually off and all in that space. You know the case I'm talking about, Jim, and everything, because she got like 120 days, and I think she has to serve for the next 10 years a probation period of 10 years, and she has to literally go back to jail on the day on the anniversary of that.
She wasn't convicted of premeditated murder. That's why the sentence was different. Rick.
So government gets away with lots of lazy and craven behavior because the media is lazy and doesn't do the investigative, in-depth stuff that it should and kind of you used to more. I mean, local news has been stripped out. Like COVID is raging right now. The numbers are about as high as they've ever been, but the CDC has been soft pedaling it because they don't want, because if they didn't, they'd be attacked from both sides. And it's bullshit that nobody's covering it.
Yeah, I know a lot of people. It's my turn, Shaq. A lot of people, I know that are getting COVID, and it is underreported. But I want to go back to the media in general. Investigative journalism. I grew up on this. I grew up on Watergate. I rushed home from school to watch the Watergate hearings, and it was investigative journalism that stopped a person who was literally going nuts in the White House. And they exposed them. And it wasn't so much the crime as the cover-up, as they say, but it was people that were doing serious investigative work. My sister-in-law worked for Sports Illustrated, was a senior writer, and they did in-depth reporting. Mm-hmm. But nowadays, she and all of her generation got laid off because what they wanted was a quick update on the websites. What was the latest news? They weren't willing to pay for in-depth research anymore. And this is what's going on in local papers. If they're not out of business entirely, mm-hmm. They really were playing for the short attention span. That's the kind of reporting that's going on now. But still, the national media, the press in general, is still the fourth estate. And we had President Trump saying it was the enemy of the people. Now, this is what has to stop. We cannot elect someone who says things like that, because the fourth estate is part of our democratic country, and it's essential to report on those in power who are doing wrong. And once we do that, then we have a fighting chance to stop them from destroying lives or inflicting their will on others in ways that they have done throughout history. That's one of the things that makes the United States a great country, is that we have challenged those in power again and again and again. And when we lose the ability to do investigative journalism and to report on it and make people aware of it, then we lose our best weapon to avoid being ruled by a few.
I got to sign out. Love you guys. See you later.
All right. Yeah, Rick said he's getting ready to go over. He's going.
No, I'm not going anywhere. No,
he's not going anywhere. That's We've got that rule. But anything. But just really quickly, Shaquille.
Hang on. I'll just respond to just a couple of things there. I think, Jim, it's not just about the media reporting on politicians that are doing something wrong. I think it's also about just reporting or corporate sex, but it's also reporting on when somebody's been left behind, or because no matter what policy you have, there's going to be some people that aren't benefiting from that, or sometimes have been slightly hurt by that. Sure. You just need to make provisions for those people as well. I think the media does have a very important role to play in that. I think one of the reasons why there is a lack of trust in the US media, which is there's more of a lack of trust in US media in the United States than there is in most countries, I think, in Western countries. And I think that part of that is because of what people consider to be bias within media outlets. But you bring up a very valid point that we shouldn't be attacking the media. We should have more of it, not less of it. And with investigative reporting, one of the most absurd situations at the moment that I see is that someone like John Oliver, who is a comedian, but he's an investigative reporter. Really, he's an investigative reporter who just presents it in a funny way. He's about as close to investigative reporting as much of his audience will ever see. And that's a shame, because you expect to see more than that.
Great point.
Right? But it means
that's how I get my news.
You're not actually having very important conversations. So we just use that Gabriel Fernandez case, for example, one of the things that the children's services were criticised about was returning kids to family members too early, or a reluctance to take kids from potentially abusive situations. Where the conversation needs to be, though, is what's the counter to that? Because the counter has already been done. We took children too easily away from families for minor issues, and the idea that we wanted to try and keep families together. So there's a really delicate balance there, and I would hate to be one of the workers for children's services in the United States or elsewhere. But that's where we need to have the conversation, and we shouldn't be relying on just Netflix documentaries.
Absolutely. Jeff, you're absolutely right. Spot on. We used to have this show that had various viewpoints on. It was on Sunday mornings, and people would discuss real ideas, and they were fairly civil to one another. And it was replaced by this, I think the show was called Counterpoint, with Pat Buchanan. I can't remember who was on the other side. And they literally were shouting at each other the whole half hour. And
Point Counterpoint.
Point Counterpoint, right. And
that
so
was the name of the show.
Yeah, and thank you. And so anyways, it was like uncivil. And they really didn't change any minds, and they didn't really get to the meat of the issues. And that kind of turned it just was symbolic of what happened to the ability for us to discuss, to work across the aisles. And my favorite villain in all of this is Newt Gingrich. He set a contract on America. He made the Republican Party, if you didn't vote along with him, then you were targeted to be primaried and kicked out in the next election. So he got Republicans all in line. And that was during the Bill Clinton days. But it was Gingrich who made it, if you didn't vote with us, you were against us, kind of, had to vote en masse. And that has been plaguing the Republican Party ever since. Now, there have been, times where I thought that they were getting out of that. And there have been Republican congressmen that I have thought were somebody I would vote for. But we've seen this swing again to this. We have to, if you don't, like what happened to Liz Cheney, she got booted out.
Hey, Jim, along those same lines, and I actually wanted to toss this to Shaquille because it's a topic that he's very passionate about, and all along those lines, since we're talking about the media and everything. We had a police chief here in Durham and everything, and she had some issues with the way that she handled her police and the way that she handled what we considered a growing crime rate here in Durham, North Carolina. So we sent her off to Memphis and everything, and now they just recently got rid of her because of the incident with Tyree Nichols, where there were 5 officers that beat this gentleman and everything, and it wasn't necessarily even white officers. I think in most of those officers were African American officers, and all those lines. And
they were part of that squad,
right? And she was actually she actually created a squad while she went to Memphis. I remember having that squad here called the Scorpion Unit when she took over as the Memphis Police Unit, which was supposed to be like a crime suppression team and everything. So I was just wondering your thoughts about that.
How do you suppress crime? Well, you might as well just a lot of these sorts of things. I would say lock up all men and all males from the ages of about 13 to 30, and you'll get a massive reduction in crime. But I don't think it's a good idea. I mean, this is just. But I want to come back to what you said there, Jim. I don't think it's just nastiness and viciousness in media. It's also in politics. You go back and look at your favorite President Nixon and have a look at the debate between him and JFK. What a polite, acknowledged each other's points of view, expressed why they thought they were a better president. That's what you would like to see, and you very rarely see it. I mean, some of the governor's races in the last election you did, but you just very rarely see it at the federal level, which I think is a real shame. But just to your point there about the Republican Party, and you see that with other political parties around the world, I think part of the reason for that is if you and I are both Republicans and I am a bit more open, I'm not going to try and control everybody or threaten to kick them out of the party because I want there to be a broad church of consensus with where we're going as a party. Whilst I might get a lot of respect, I might also be considered too nice a guy. You, on the other hand, are this mean, controlling person who's going to threaten to primary everybody and get rid of them. more likely than not, you're going to beat me unless I harden up and start using the same tactics. So it's that race to the bottom. And I would also suggest that Democrats will do that as well on their side. AOC, for example, threatens to primary people quite frequently.
Yeah, but she's not as successful.
Well, she's not as successful, no. But I think, one of the things,
So
what happened to Bill
this is a
Clinton?
false comparison. I think that it's on both sides. I think
Either way, one of the things that happened was when Republicans went after Bill Clinton, the way that they did, I thought it was quite unfair in a lot of the ways that they tried to. And I think part of that was because they didn't like the fact that they got a one-term president out of George Bush Sr. I think as well, it could have been some revenge over Watergate. Now, whatever the reasons are, I don't know. But whatever the reasons are, this sort of stuff has to stop because the country should not be being run because of the best interests of party interests. It should be run for the people. And I don't know how you're going to stop it, but I think the political parties need to be more responsive to their people.
Absolutely, Shaq.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that. But unfortunately, you have these super majorities that take control, and any party, whether it's Republican or Democrat, and then they kind of like don't really do the kind of conversation across the aisles that I remember. Even I think Jim remembers as well. That was going on definitely in the 90s, and I would even argue the early 2000s. Whereas now it's the extremists on both sides that don't even believe in talking to each other. They want to.
We also haven't talked about gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is gotten down to
good at that down here, Jim.
Pardon me?
We do a good job of gerrymandering in North Carolina.
Yeah, and all around the country you see it where counties or districts are carved out in these nothing that makes any sense at all. They go down and up and then over and up. And
I can tell you it's very effective. It works. So
it totally works, and that's why they do it, Nick. But it's wrong.
Well, that's your opinion.
It is my opinion, Nick, but I think what we want is a representative of the people. And not having the politicians carve out little seats for themselves where they're never going to get unelected.
Into a non-partisan.
It's undemocratic.
Jim, would you be prepared? Like, just imagine that you could wave a magic wand and change things. Would you prefer to see a system a bit more like Australia has, where you vote for your local representative? So perhaps you vote for your local because you're going to vote for the president directly, and like say California, for example, rather than all 55 electoral votes going to the popular vote president, that it actually be split and be more reflective of the population with the proviso that obviously bigger population centers would have slightly less, pretty much how your elections work now. Would that be something that you'd support? Like was it Nebraska does it, I think? And
I believe in representative democracy. I don't believe in like what Plato used to talk about, mob rule. And so I do think that we should be representative. And I do think that people have put their minds together and stopped it being representative in our electoral systems now. We call it gerrymandering. It's probably been going on for a very long time. But right now, it's gotten down to a science. It was never this scientific in the past. So now you could have a red district and it's going to stay red. And so it's defeating the purpose of representative democracy, and I'm for that. Now we have a bicameral system where each state gets 2 senators, and that's not very representative, but it was done to offset this idea that California is going to have so many representatives and Iowa's not going to have enough. So these things are worth talking about. Like, how do you have a bicameral system that's fair? I think the Dakotas, for example, should get 1 vote. I don't think there should be one for North and South Dakota. But, that's just an opinion. So we could have different discussions about how to make this more equitable. Right now,
would you support though, to my core question, would you support something like what is it, Nebraska and Maine that split the electors?
Some of them do allocations.
Yes. Yeah,
I think it's only those 2 states.
Most of them, it's winner take all because the United States is based on winner take all. I've heard all Jim's arguments.
You guys aren't actually answering my question though. Is that something?
I've heard all of Nick's arguments too. So, No, I would support something like that in theory. In practice, I would have to see how it would work out. But I do think that anything that is in theory representative, which our system is not right now. But if it is representative, in that's something I could support. And allocations, that makes sense to me. But the electoral system the electoral college rather doesn't make sense. It's an archaic system that needs to go away, in my opinion.
One of our many archaic systems that probably need to go. And I do agree though it looks like the top story in 2024 will be the election story. I did listen to all Jim's arguments. I've been listening to them for years about don't vote for Trump. But I can tell you this, a lot of people don't care what you say. They're not going to vote for Biden. So the thing is, it doesn't matter what you say about Trump, and they're going to vote for Trump. Period.
Well, you say that,
Absolutely, Nick. I'm not arguing that.
But,
obvious.
Hold on a second. You say that,
That
but
doesn't make any of my points invalid.
No, one of the people that David Walker talks about all the time actually came out and said that he could not vote for Donald Trump, that being Joe Manchin. So he told Face the Nation on Sunday that he won't be voting for Donald Trump in the upcoming presidential election. The response came swiftly when the senator was asked point blank if he'd vote for Trump. He said, "Let me make it very clear. I love my country too much to vote for Donald Trump. I love my country too much, and I think it would be very detrimental to my country. I want to make sure that people have a choice, but also understanding the person with a character in this. We have to see what happens on Super Tuesday. I think by then you're going to know who's in the game and where we stand." But he made it very clear that he would not vote for him, and of course he's been floated as a third-party candidate, even in the No Labels party and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see how he plays it out.
Can I ask a question? Based on the current map, which is going to change, or maybe it won't, but the current map based on the poll results, there is a long shot possibility of this actually being a tie. And I mean, it's been close. It's going to come down to those handful of swing states.
Sure.
Has that ever happened in US history? And what actually happens if it is 269 to 269? How does that tie get broken? Does anyone know?
I believe it goes to the House of Representatives.
The House of
It goes
Representatives.
to the House.
Which is currently controlled by the Republicans. So would it be the House of Representatives as voted on the day, or the House of Representatives that it's already there?
Well, that's a good question.
Details.
I'm glad you know the answer. Your constitution. This is brilliant.
I assume it's the party in control when they.
Yeah, I assume it's the party in control, but I'm not sure. It might be the one that's coming in, and there's even people that are talking about flipping it and everything.
The one coming in. It'll be the one that's sitting,
So
because the one that comes in after.
Currently, I've got them up on my screen. There's 6 states. Does anybody want to guess how these 6 states are going to vote? You got Pennsylvania, which the current polls are sort of went to the Republicans again. It's gone back to Democrats. It's gone back to Republicans. Yeah. Michigan's another one. Nevada, I'd be pretty surprised if the Democrats picked up Nevada, but I'm not sure about Arizona. That's my personal take. Does anyone else have any opinions on those swing states and how they're going to go?
Georgia. It'll all be. It just depends. We'll know more around November 7th. I can give you more definitive.
Yeah. Thanks.
Nevada. I'm not ready to.
Georgia's going to be an interesting state because it's in the South. It's surrounded by other Republican states. So I don't know how is the demographic changing. What's happening over in Georgia?
A lot of things can happen between now and then. But one prediction I do make: before Biden leaves office, he'll pardon his son. Watch.
I don't know if he'll need to.
Okay.
The whole idea of trying to impeach Joe Biden just because they tried to impeach Donald Trump, that's the kind of silliness that the country doesn't need. And this whole Hunter Biden thing. We don't talk about Jared Kushner and the $2 billion he got from after he left office, or he wasn't in office, but after he left the Trump administration. Dealing with the Saudis, all of this stuff, people's children in engaging in wealth activities for their own benefit off of their father's names or off of their parents' names. That's been going on for centuries as well.
This has come in from one of our viewers, but I think it's a good question. Do you think it's murder watching people drown like that? This deals with the.
Is that from a viewer, or is that an official Pod TV?
I have no clue, but it's basically a good question. The facts are that the people that sat on the border of the United States watched the immigrants try to swim in, and they drowned. And so rather than do anything, they just watched them drown.
Yeah. What would you do? I asked myself, what would I do? I wouldn't let them drown.
You wouldn't let them drown? You'd jump in the river?
Well, I would choose something to secure myself first. I'd say, am I strong enough? What's the river current? All that kind of calculation. But yeah, I wouldn't watch somebody drown without
Because
trying to
the
do
Navy
something about
SEAL
it.
guy jumped in after.
But that
the
opens
Navy-
up, you can take that a step further, which is that the fact that these people are so desperate, they're prepared to take those sorts of risks in the first place.
Absolutely.
Shouldn't we? This is an American situation, but I can refer it back to what's happening with immigration to Australia. Shouldn't we be doing something to help our poor neighbours so that their people are not so desperate? There were videos on part off the border wall where people were basically like throwing over and lowering down 3-4-year-old kids and just leaving them and hoping for the best. Can you imagine how devastating that would be for a parent? Like that would just.
We're at the hour, so we have to go.
So
So
speaking of going, just really quickly, we do have to go. I was just going to tell you that we did have a